So you can trace the rhetorical shift. First, the overt militarism got buried under an arts and education gloss in the 70s.
Then, starting in the 80s, the corporate lexicon crept in.
Oh, no.
Life-changing, transformational, breakthrough. The same words you'd hear in an LGAT seminar or a corporate HR retreat.
This is the Marching Revolution podcast.
Boots on the ground with a thunderous beat. Hearts in sync, our purpose complete. Map of the future drawn by our stride. Through the struggle we walk unified.
Welcome to the Marching Revolution, where we're always asking the musical question, who's in control? I'm Edward Michael Francis.
And I'm also Edward Michael Francis. Two hosts, one name, infinite sass.
Comrades, today we're not doing some quick hit.
Oh no.
This is part one of a two-part deep dive tracing the history of junior drum and bugle corps in the United States. Since they were the roots of the juniors, we'll touch on all-age or senior corps here and there. But all-age corps and the DCA side of the activity will get their own spotlight in part two, a Patreon bonus episode.
Rock on.
Today's focus is primarily on junior corps, and it's based on the article, The Shifting Soul, Origins of U.S. Drum and Bugle Corps, 1900 to Present, Part 1.
Wow, what AI hack came up with that title?
Present.
Yikes. Well, believe us when we say we dug deep for this one.
Indeed.
Archival documents, veterans publications, community histories, and even the dusty corners of old drum corps forums. All cross-checked and sorted with the help of our trusty librarian, AI.
That's right. We don't just use generative AI as a production tool.
Nope.
In this case, it's been like having a tireless research assistant, pulling sources, checking facts, and keeping us honest as we put this history together.
So what you're about to hear isn't just vibes, it's the product of hours of digging, cross-referencing, and occasionally screaming at PDFs.
Stupid Adobe! Why are you so stupid? The full article is available over on Patreon, and yes, comrades, there is a shiny new website too.
Ooh.
We'll plug both later, but just know the Revolution has a homepage.
Speaking of revolutions, our feline companion, Myron Rosander Francis, remains the truest revolutionary among us.
Yay, Myron!
They're plotting in silence right now, tail twitching like a metronome of dissent, waiting for the moment to overthrow the Kibble industrial complex.
And when they do, it'll be life-changing, transformational, and definitely not brought to you by DCI.
Cue the sting. Now, before we jump in, let's talk about sources.
Okay.
Some people might freak out if they hear we're pulling from forums and old message boards.
Because Captain Gatekeeper is out there clutching his Shako, right?
Exactly. But in drum corps, these posts are sometimes the only surviving record of things the official archives never cared about.
And we're not just repeating rumors.
No.
We check them against archives, scholarship, and whatever scraps exist. This activity doesn't have a Library of Congress wing. You work with what's left.
So here's the thing. For decades, the feel-good myth of drum corps has been that returning veterans just wanted to spread the joy of music.
Like a Norman Rockwell painting. Kids with bugles, Uncle Sam beaming, everyone holding hands under the flag while we all read from the Bible and pass around the potato salad with raisins.
Right, but do you buy that?
Girl, get real. The records show the American Legion and VFW weren't interested in music education.
They weren't.
They wanted obedience, pageantry, and patriotism on parade.
So basically percussion, parade blocks, and propaganda?
Correct. They borrowed military drill, uniforms, even the language of early 20th century youth movements.
And the point wasn't just teaching kids how to play. It was to crank out model citizens.
Quite right.
Obedient, orderly, and 100% loyal.
So, when we say the militarist DNA still runs through modern corps, we mean it. Even with the flashy costumes and artsy talk, you can still trace the lineage right back to the Veterans Hall.
And that's the path we're going to follow in this deep dive. We'll start in those Veterans Halls, where the American Legion and VFW built Junior Corps as youth platoons. We'll track how militarism shaped the rules, the shows, and the very language of the activity.
Then we'll move through the Vietnam era when the public turned against the armed forces and into the creation of DCI in the 70s. From there, we'll trace the rebrand into arts and education, and finally, large group awareness training rhetoric of the 80s and beyond.
And if you care about drum corps, don't worry. So do we.
Very much.
But loving something means being honest about its roots, not hiding them.
Precisely. This episode is the whole arc. 100 years of control, rebranding, and resistance, all in one go.
So if you've only ever heard the rosy version, community, heritage, music education,
Buckle up. This isn't heritage, it's social engineering with a high step. Before we delve into the timeline, we need to talk about the ideology that shaped this whole thing.
All right.
Because drum corps didn't just appear out of a vacuum, right?
Right. The vets weren't like, hey, kids, play away your blahs on this bugle. They were drawing from the same ideological soup that was running through American youth programs in the early 20th century. And a lot of that soup was pseudoscience.
One big influence was something called muscular Christianity.
Ew.
Sounds like a protein shake with a cross on the label, right? But no, this was taken dead serious.
It was the claim that physical fitness, discipline, and moral virtue were inseparable. You see it in the YMCA, the Boy Scouts, all those groups. And the Legion grabbed it too. Hard drills and long rehearsals weren't just about music.
Oh no.
They were about strengthening kids physically and morally.
But that wasn't evidence-based. It was moral panic masquerading as science.
Right.
They feared a weak-willed generation after World War I. So they thought sports and drum corps would forge better citizens. Not better musicians.
Nope.
Better drones.
Same logic drove Legion Baseball, which they launched in 1926. Sure, they liked baseball, but the real mission was Americanism.
Yep.
Patriotic values, sportsmanship, and fitness. Drum corps was the same machine, just with more brass and bass drums.
And this dovetailed with another shaky, quote, science. Progressive era social efficiency.
Which boiled down to kids need structured, constant activity to become productive, law-abiding citizens. Translation, free time equals delinquency, so let's rehearse them all summer in 100-degree heat. You know, for kids.
The Legion told posts to hold picnics, concerts, sports, and of course, drum corps.
Naturally.
They weren't just entertainment, they were drills in punctuality, group cooperation, and deference to authority.
And here's the kicker.
Yeah?
They sold it as community bonding, but it was really assimilation. Schools and civics groups used sports and music to grind immigrants and working-class kids into proper American citizens.
Which is where the third and strongest idea comes in, Americanization.
Again, ew.
After World War I, the Legion became the loudest megaphone for straight-up nationalism in U.S. civic life.
And drum corps, they were perfect tools.
Indeed.
Immigrant kids, first and second generation Americans, marching in U.S. uniforms, blasting Stars and Stripes forever, saluting the flag. Assimilation with a drumline.
The message couldn't be clearer. Be American or nothing. Total devotion to flag and country, and if you were a hyphenated American, the goal was to sand that hyphen right off of you.
So let's not sugarcoat this. Muscular Christianity, social efficiency, Americanization, these were pseudo-scientific, ideological projects.
Bingo.
Junior corps weren't neutral youth programs. They were machines built to produce citizens who were fit, obedient, and loyal above all else.
And that's the foundation we need to understand before we move into the timeline itself. Otherwise, it just looks like parades and bugles. But underneath, it's social engineering with a feather plume.
All right, ideology on the table. Now, let's talk about how it actually played out after World War I.
Corps in the United States emerged straight out of battlefield traditions. Veterans came home with drums and bugles they used in the trenches, and they adapted them into community groups.
But the American Legion wasted no time.
Oh no.
Founded in 1919, they jumped on corps as a way to package ideological control and keep their members connected.
They even said it outright. Forming a corps was about expressing patriotism and holding on to that military bond.
Oof.
And by 1921, they held their first national championship at the Legion Convention in Kansas City.
So, not even 2 years in, it's a competitive showcase. And who's on the field? Mostly war vets, marching in utilitarian military outfits, drilling like they never left the service.
That's why they were called Senior Corps. These weren't kids learning scales. They were veterans staging military performance art for the public.
But then the veterans of foreign wars got jealous, like, hey, we want our own toy soldiers. So they launched their own contest in 1928.
By the mid-30s, both the Legion and the VFW realized they could expand their influence by bringing in youth. The VFW added junior competitions in 1936, and the Legion followed suit in 1937 with the Sons of the American Legion.
And this is where it shifts from veteran nostalgia to actual social engineering. They're not just keeping old soldiers busy, they're grooming kids, teenagers, under veteran sponsorship.
And the structure was pure military. Drum majors in martial attire, ranks of members, and competitions scored on military-style precision.
Including inspections, judges checking posture and shined shoes, just like an army review.
Yeesh.
Imagine being 13 years old and having a grown man with a clipboard dock you points because your horn wasn't polished enough.
It was discipline by design. Execution, inspection, precision marching, that's what the judges rewarded.
So let's just call it what it was. Early drum corps weren't innocent youth bands. They were civilian platoons on parade,
Right.
teaching kids to embody the posture of the armed forces.
By the 1920s and 30s, the American Legion and VFW had already stamped drum corps with their banner of Americanism. We've talked about that ideology in theory, but here's how it played out and who was allowed through the door in reality.
Americanism. Sounds wholesome, right? But in practice, it meant loyalty tests, ideological control, and straight-up exclusion.
Wah, wah.
These organizations were for white males. Period. Corps were literally described as an important medium for the cultivation and expression of Americanism. Translation, you look like us, you act like us, or you don't belong.
And that meant any time there was a holiday or a civic event, the local corps was out there on display, bugles flaring, flags flying, the whole town reminded what side they were expected to stand on.
That wasn't just fun times.
Oh, no.
That was propaganda on parade, built on the backs of a very narrow definition of who counted as American.
Inside the competitions, the regulations hammered the same point. Rule books read like military manuals.
Yes.
Corps had to march flag presentations, stay in rigid formation, as well as maintain strict appearance standards. No long hair, no beards, no jewelry.
Then came the tick system. Every error, interval off, step wrong, drum ticks, was penalized. Zero tolerance. That's not art. That's basic training with bugles.
And it's worth remembering, at first, only actual veterans and their sons could march.
Quite right.
Legion Corps were for vets. VFW Corps required overseas service. It was later, grudgingly, that civilians could march under a post. And even then, the assumption was white, male, disciplined.
Women were let in slowly, usually in support staff or roles like the color guard at first, and African Americans were locked out for decades, forced to start their own corps, which is a whole other story in itself. The point is, integration came late and always with resistance.
And the DNA of that exclusion still lingers.
Uh-oh.
To this day, the Cavaliers remain an all-male drum corps. The roots of segregation and sexism were never fully weeded out. They just got papered over with new language.
So I guess you could say that from the beginning, drum corps weren't just like the military. They were military units in civilian drag, marching the town square as both performance And control.
You would be right. And lady, the public ate it up. Parades, civic ceremonies, patriotic displays. Local papers bragged about how Corps fostered nationalism, how disciplined the kids looked, and how all-American the spectacle was.
But all that civic pride was really about reinforcing the idea that military-style unity defined community life.
And when the parents asked, "Is this good for kids?" the Legion had their perfect pitch.
Of course.
They called Drum Corps positive youth activities, teaching teamwork, leadership, and respect for authority.
And let's be real, respect for authority was the whole point.
Yeah.
That phrase is doing all the heavy lifting in the brochure.
It wasn't about self-expression. It was about shutting down idle leisure, which progressive-era leaders claimed would turn kids into criminals. Better to keep them in formation than risk them, thinking and feeling.
Certainly that would be the end. So Drum Corps was sold as a win-win, a diversion for the town and character building for the kids.
But in truth,
Yeah?
it was indoctrination disguised as recreation.
Indubitably.
And only much later, slowly and begrudgingly, opening the door to everyone else. After World War II, the activity blew up. You had millions of veterans back home, the baby boom in full swing, and suddenly everyone wanted to sponsor a corps.
Yeah, it wasn't just the Legion and VFW anymore. Catholic parishes, Boy Scouts, police leagues, even the makers of Spam sponsored an all-girl corps.
Wait a second, Spam?
That's right, Spam.
Cool.
Shout out to the Hormel girls.
Holla!
By the late 40s and 50s, there were hundreds of junior corps popping up.
And the big contests were enormous. National championships with more than 100 corps showing up.
Wow.
Imagine the logistics of that.
And the balance shifted too. The juniors started to outnumber the seniors, which meant the indoctrination pipeline had moved firmly into youth culture.
Quite right. And the Cold War only turned up the volume.
Right.
The United States was obsessed with patriotism, loyalty, and youth readiness. And Drum Corps fit the bill perfectly.
So much so that in 1958, Eisenhower himself sent a letter to the VFW National Championships saying the Drum Corps activity embodied American ideals.
Ooh.
That's not cute halftime shows. That's the president stamping approval on martial discipline.
And that image mattered. A crisp junior corps on Main Street was supposed to be a reassuring symbol. Don't worry, America's kids are disciplined and ready for anything.
And the shows themselves still look like military drills with instruments.
Yes.
Precision was everything. Judges rewarded corps for looking like soldiers on parade.
And through the 60s, that never changed. Instructors were treated like commanding officers. Members had to march with ramrod posture, and silence at attention was enforced.
Color guards carried rifles, sabers, and flag like real honor guards, literally guarding the colors.
Correct.
There was no dancing or spinning yet.
Correct.
And uniforms? Straight out of the service catalog.
Correct.
Some corps wore army dress, others Marine, others West Point cadet styles. And then you had the troopers in Wyoming doing full cavalry cosplay.
And in local communities, corps members were hyped as heroes. Newspapers bragged whenever their corps was featured somewhere or brought home trophies from nationals.
Parents loved it because it kept kids busy and under adult supervision all summer.
Sure.
And for some, it was even billed as prep for actual military service. More than a few alumni said corps made boot camp a breeze.
So the story didn't change, just the scale. From a niche veterans pastime to a national youth phenomenon, Drum Corps still carried the same militarist DNA, dressed up as patriotic entertainment and youth development.
A bigger stage, same mission.
We'll be right back.
The rhythm of hope, it pounds in our chest. We won't stop until we've done our best. The world is ours to turn to flame, and from it we'll forge a brand new name. The brand new name.
Welcome back.
We'll
By the late 60s, the ground was shifting. Vietnam had blown a hole in America's love affair with the military, and suddenly, corps marching like military mini-me's didn't feel so noble anymore.
Yeah, the counterculture, anti-war protests, the whole questioning authority vibe, none of that played well with formations straight out of a parade ground.
Truth.
Even kids inside the activity were saying the old martial style felt outdated.
One Legion Drum Corps enthusiast even admitted the kids were a lot more liberal in their thoughts. That's the polite way of saying the young people weren't buying the bullshit anymore.
So, corps started adapting. Less rigid military songs, more pop and jazz arrangements, more colorful pageantry instead of service wear. Entertainment began to matter as much as looking soldier straight.
And meanwhile, inside the activity, directors and staffs were chafing under the Legion and VFW rulebooks.
They were.
The tick system, the conservative judges, it all stifled innovation.
Imagine putting together a show with dance in the guard or a brass arrangement of a pop tune only to get slammed with penalties because it wasn't regulation enough.
Oh, and don't think for 1 second that they were uniformly enforced.
What?
Especially for the African American and all-girl corps.
Shocking.
And the kicker? Most of the people writing the rules had never marched drum corps in the modern sense. It was old schoolers clinging to military etiquette, holding the whole thing back.
That frustration boiled over. In 1971, 13 junior corps met up, called themselves the Combine, sometimes the Alliance.
Heard of it?
And they decided to form their own circuit.
Which gave birth in 1972 to Drum Corps International.
Boom.
That was the seismic break. For the first time, the corps ran themselves instead of answering to the Legion or VFW.
And DCI's first move was to blow up the rulebook.
Right.
They brought in judging philosophy that valued general effect and artistry while keeping ticks in the execution captions. For a time, anyway.
No more shoe polish checks before a show. Suddenly designers could do more abstract drill or stage purely theatrical programs.
But the rebrand wasn't just in performance. It was rhetorical.
Exactly.
DCI started selling itself as art through instruction. Corps were educational organizations for youth instead of mock platoons.
And they leaned hard into words like leadership, teamwork, excellence, youth development. This was about creating good students and artists, not soldiers.
At least in theory. The militarist DNA was still there, but wrapped in a softer, less politically charged package.
The shift was about survival. By the mid-70s, nobody wanted to see kids in army cosplay while Vietnam was still raw.
Nope.
So Drum Corps recontextualized nationalism, abstracted it, and sold it as character building.
Meanwhile, the Legion and VFW circuits withered. The Legion held its last national championship in 1980, and the VFW bowed out in 1984.
By then, the DCI ecosystem was the only game that mattered.
Yep.
The military chapter of Drum Corps history was over, or at least officially over, because plenty of the structure and language still carried the marks of its origin.
What DCI really did was bury the overt worship of the armed forces under a new mask,
Which was?
that of arts education. So if the origins of the activity were built on war-driven ideology, the modern era swapped out the camouflage for something just as controlling. Corporate LGAT, or Large Group Awareness Training, rhetoric.
Yeah, starting in the 80s. While corporate America was busy sending middle managers to breakthrough seminars and transformational leadership weekends, the core activity had its own rebrand.
The boots and obsession over hair length didn't sell anymore in post-Vietnam America.
Yeah.
But the hierarchy, the obedience, the high control structures, they didn't go anywhere. They just got dressed up in new words.
And those words, breakthrough, transformation, life-changing, suddenly directors sounded less like drill sergeants and more like self-help gurus.
The message wasn't, this will make you a good soldier. It was, this will change your life.
Culty.
The promise was an awakening, something only accessible if you gave the activity absolute commitment.
Exhibit A, The Cadets, 2005, The Zone. George Hopkins and Mark Sylvester sat down to do a commentary on the show, and if you strip away the music talk, It reads like an EST seminar.
Exactly. You hear stuff like, quote, members wanted to be on the edge, or, quote, we wanted to take chances, stretch the box.
Gross.
We're creating, quote, a surreal world of transformation.
That's not band talk. That's LGAT talk. That's Landmark Forum with mellophones.
And the show itself? A teenage girl named Danny, enticed by a website promising all your dreams will come true, enters through a door, then a series of rooms, each one a new altered reality.
Yikes.
That's literally an allegory for a staged breakthrough.
Wow, a door that makes your dreams come true? That sounds ripped right out of EST.
Yep.
But it wasn't just Hopkins. By 2005, that language, stretching, transformation, breaking old formulas, had already saturated leadership circles across DCI.
Sadly, yes.
They were just channeling what corporate America had been selling since the 80s.
Which makes sense. The activity needed to justify its same high control methods, but in words a post-Vietnam, post-Cold War public could stomach.
So what do we come up with? A hybrid model. The military skeleton was still there in rehearsals, chain of command, and grueling physical demands.
But the flesh was corporate LGAT language of metamorphosis, inner development, and revelation.
Discipline rebranded as leadership training, exploitation reframed as personal development.
So culty.
The suffering became the sales pitch. This isn't just hard, it's a soul-encompassing overhaul.
And you hear it everywhere. Directors, DCI officials, press releases, all leaning hard on transformative language.
So no, it wasn't about duty anymore.
You said duty.
Stop it! It wasn't about duty. It was marketed as an inner awakening.
But let's be clear, all these LGAT philosophies are just a collection of labored rhetorical tricks and thought-stopping cliches.
Right, but we see the same pattern.
The same.
New vocabulary, same high control system.
And predictably, over the years, the track kept narrowing. We used to have robust regional circuits, Drum Corps Midwest, Drum Corps East, Drum Corps South, even a Drum Corps West, each with their own calendars and championships before the national tour.
Yup, one by one, those regionals faded or got folded into DCI-sanctioned events. Even marquee meets like the US Open ended up inside the DCI orbit.
And on the all-age side, DCA ran its own ecosystem for decades. But in 2023, DCA and DCI announced a formal partnership. 2023 was DCA's final standalone championship, and in 2024, DCI launched the all-age class, effectively replacing DCA's independent circuit.
Which leaves one organization writing the rules, booking the tour, and awarding the hardware. The kind of consolidation the founders said they didn't want when they vowed not to trample regional circuits back in '71.
Right? DCI started out essentially as a worker co-op, but has hardened into the very monopoly it was created to resist.
Grim.
The junior corps once banded together to escape the control of the VFW and American Legion. Now, they've recreated that same top-down system in their own image.
An irony so big, you could drive the box truck inside it.
All right, friends and foes, quick break to talk about how you can support the work we're doing here.
Listen up.
For updates, playlists, and everything us, go to cinemarchmedia.com.
And on Patreon, patreon.com/cinemarchmedia. You can get early access to those articles, behind-the-scenes notes, and bonus content.
If you join at the $6 tier, you'll get early access to new articles and updates.
And at the $10 tier, you get all that plus early audio, bonus episodes, and the occasional unhinged tangent that didn't make the main feed.
And of course, both tiers include surprise cameos from Myron the Cat.
Who, by the way, is basically the Shay of this household. Furry, photogenic, and convinced every nap is an act of rebellion.
So, if you believe in supporting independent leftist media and you want to keep this project going, head to patreon.com/cinemarchmedia or cinemarchmedia.com.
Don't just think of it as support, it's solidarity. Plus, you'll never miss a chance to hear Myron's political hot takes.
Ha, ha, ha. Visit today. So now let's pause a second to review the evolution of the activity's language over time, because the words tell the story just as much as the lemma or the straight lines.
And in the early days, the language was not subtle.
It was not.
American Legion and VFW documents were loud about it. 100% Americanism. Pledges to, quote, instill love of the flag. Promises to keep the spirit of martial discipline alive.
So militarist social engineering. Plain and simple. Again, for kids.
And they didn't even hide it. Corps winning Legion championships literally marched under banners that said 100% Americanism. Like, how much more obvious can you get?
But fast forward, and the language has gone through a makeover or two, or three. Today, Drum Corps International calls itself a, quote, life-enriching performing art, with all the buzzwords of youth development, creativity, and performing arts.
Dan Atchison, longtime DCI CEO, is praised as embodying the transformative power of Drum Corps. Madison Scouts Director Chris Komnick says their mission is, quote, life-changing educational experiences.
Bluecoat's CEO Mike Scott talks about transformational ideas. Carolina Crown describes transformational movements.
Oh, did Crown have time to say all that? Weren't they busy trying to charge kids to be prop movers?
Now, to be fair, they probably squeezed it in right after allegedly mishandling an assault case.
From what we've heard, if that corps were a timeline, it would fall into the category of worst possible.
Hold on, there's more. The Crossmen straight up say on their homepage, the Crossman experience is life-changing.
And Santa Clara Vanguard, they also ask donors to sustain, quote, life-changing opportunities for members.
Sensing a pattern.
That's not coincidence. That's coordinated branding.
So you can trace the rhetorical shift.
Indeed.
First, the overt militarism got buried under an arts and education gloss in the 70s.
Then, starting in the 80s, the corporate lexicon crept in. Life-changing, transformational, breakthrough. The same words you'd hear in an LGAT seminar or a corporate HR retreat.
And the result is double erasure.
How so?
The militarist intent gets whitewashed, then the arts gloss gets co-opted by corporate self-help talk.
But what never changes? The structure, the high control environment, the hierarchy, the obedience, it all stays.
Right?
Only the vocabulary shifts to match whatever the public will tolerate.
Original document shouted, "We're teaching discipline and patriotism."
And today's DCI whispers, "We're a life-changing arts organization." Same cage, different paint job.
So, this isn't just language evolution. It's purposeful, historical obfuscation. A calculated rebranding project to make sure nobody asks where all of this really came from. So that's the real story. Drum and Bugle Corps didn't start as wholesome community bands.
Nope.
They began as youth auxiliaries of two of the most powerful veterans organizations in U.S. history.
And their mission wasn't music education, it was warrior ethic.
Nailed it.
The plan was simple. Use music as the lure, use drill as the training, and turn kids into civilian soldiers.
From the 1920s through the 60s, Drum Corps functioned as mobile ads for nationalism, discipline, and forced unity, marching billboards for the Legion and the VFW's parallel efforts.
Then came Vietnam. Public appetite for overt militarism collapsed. The kids weren't buying it, the streets were full of protests, and suddenly, the activity had an image problem.
So the top junior corps staged a breakaway with DCI. The apparel got flashier, the drills more abstract, and the rhetoric leaned on music education.
But let's be honest, the hierarchy and eugenics from the Veterans Hall never went away.
And by the 1980s, a new ideology crept in, the LGAT language of self-help seminars, EST, Landmark, The whole breakthrough vocabulary that corporate America was gorging on?
Right, so discipline became leadership training, exploitation became personal growth, and cores weren't sold as patriotic anymore. They were marketed as transformational and breakthrough experiences.
The skeleton stayed. Rehearsal structures, chain of command, physical demands, but the flesh was all corporate doublespeak.
And that's the through line.
What is it?
The activity has always mirrored the dominant American ideology of the time.
Because understanding that history matters. It strips away the nostalgia and shows the activity for what it really is. A high-control institution endlessly rebranding to stay palatable.
It by no means erases the artistry or the community that came out of it.
But
it forces us to see the legacy honestly. Not heritage, but social engineering. First militarist, later managerial.
What did we learn today?
That drum corps history isn't the wholesome campfire story we were fed.
Quite.
It's martialism, Americanization, and later high control rhetoric, all dressed up with dinkles and dot books.
We learned that the uniforms, the weird inspections, even the very word corps came directly from the military.
And when that became too toxic in the Vietnam era, the activity rebranded itself as art and education. When that language ran dry in the 80s, it pivoted again to corporate transformation speak.
Again, the structures of control never changed.
They did not.
Just the packaging.
That's why we maintain that drum corps started out as a cult and hasn't really changed at its very center.
We're not saying it's beyond reform, and we have some ideas about that which we'll cover in a later episode.
Indeed.
But as it stands right now, the DNA has been there from the start and remains to this very day.
And that's the takeaway. Even though drum corps has always mirrored the dominant ideology of America, it's always been high control.
Truth.
And it's going to take quite a bit more work to undo the harmful structures still inhabiting the activity.
Acknowledging the truth doesn't mean we dismiss the artistry or the community people found there, but it does force us to strip away the nostalgia and see what's really important.
Friendship, community, a sense of purpose. These are good things.
So good.
But they're all undone when the environment remains rotted.
There it is.
We need change.
And if we can do that, maybe we can imagine something healthier for the future of the activity. Something that doesn't need to dress control up as heritage or a false promise of transformation.
That's what the marching revolution is about.
Preach.
Telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, so the next generation can decide what they want to inherit.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive titled The Shifting Soul, The Origins of U.S. Drum and Bugle Corps, 1900 to present. It was a labor of love, and it's just part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll turn our attention to all age corps and DCA in a special bonus episode on Patreon.
Be sure to visit our website at www.cinemarchmedia.com and follow us on Patreon, TikTok, YouTube, and everywhere else you get your podcasts.
And as usual, special thanks to Myron Rosander Francis,
Meow.
our resident anti-landmark representative. They can sniff out a fake breakthrough faster than George Hopkins can dish them out. This has been the Marching Revolution.
Bye.
Boots on the ground.
Thank you for listening to the Marching Revolution podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Through the struggle, we walk unified. Marching forward where no chains can hold. Hands in the dirt, we carve out gold. From the ashes, we rise, we sing. For the power of the people is everything. Flags that wave like the dawn's first light, guiding us through the endless night. Every step shakes the earth awake. Our voices roar for justice's sake. Marching forward where no chains can hold. Hands in the dirt, we carve out gold. From the ashes we rise, we sing. For the power of the people is everything. The rhythm of hope. We won't stop until we've done our best. The world is ours to turn to flame, and from it we'll forge a brand new name. Yeah! Craft the future, the wheels won't stall. Shoulder to shoulder we answer the call. Brick by brick through sweat and strive. In unity together we thrive.
Copyright 2025 Cinemarch Media.